Hammond's introduction to meeting Grant, when his helicopter lands and it's like blowing away at the dig site, it's already establishing from this beginning the potential conflict between Graham and Sattler versus Hammond, which is that his technology is seeking to blow away the past and render it irrelevant by like presenting his new future. He doesn't really have a particular care for like their dig site. So he comes in, messes up everything, and then whisks them away. And I think that's like an effective way to establish what Hammond is ignoring as he's bulldozing forward into the future.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us some of our favorite guests, including Avalon and Sean, to review a quintessential classic known as Jurassic Park, the 1993 film that came out with a screenplay by Michael Crichton and David Cope and directed by Steven Spielberg. It was based on Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and it's a classic, especially in the dinosaur genre of thriller horror type content. Big beasts, big monsters. This is really one of those staples that you get in that genre. So that's what we're going into today. You're always looking for some of those amazing classics. Why are they great, and why do people still talk about them? That's what today's about. So stay tuned and you'll hear a lot more about that. But to give you that initial impression, right? What did you first think, or what do you even think of when you think of this film? Sean, you want to kick us off with your thoughts?
The thing I think of is timeless. Jurassic Park, based on the way it was filmed, based on the effects that it creates, based on the themes it presents, all carry over into the modern day 30 years later. And it is a good movie for all audiences and ages, well, if your kids can handle it.
So I have a mixed feelings about the whole Jurassic Park franchise as a whole. It's been a minute since I watched the first Jurassic Park movie. So watching it again, I was immediately I don't know how old I was when I watched the first one, but I realized some things this time around, oh wait, there's actually more depth to this movie than I remember first time around. So I actually have I think the movie works on a lot of levels, and it's actually really good with some things it handles. Not everything is perfect, but it is at least this first one does a really good job handling some of its material.
I think in this watch through, because obviously I've seen it before. It has been a minute, but I'd seen it before, and getting that revitalized experience of it, I saw a lot of things. I was like, wow, that was actually very clever, especially for something that maybe in my mind stuck out as this is just a stereotypical monster, movie in the genre of dinosaurs, right? And who doesn't love dinosaurs? But this is just another one of those. And going back into it, realizing, there was a lot of nuance in how they developed themes and ideas and introduced things early on. So it's definitely enjoyable, even from a film theory standpoint and all of that good stuff. But we'll get into that today. So if you're not familiar with Jurassic Park, Avalon, you want to give everyone the summary, the basic outline of what this film is about?
Yeah, so Jurassic Park takes place on Isla Nublar, a island in the middle of the ocean somewhere. I forget which ocean. But more or less this John Hammond, the founder of the park, he invites several scientists over and his grandchildren to give a tour of his new theme park, Jurassic Park, in which he has live dinosaurs that he's genetically recreated. And he's trying to get their backing so that he can just quell some investors and just to give the appearance that everything is good with this park and just to get the world's acceptance. Of course, things go wrong. They're stranded in the park, and the dinosaurs get loose, and then it becomes a fight for survival as they try to escape.
Yep. So that's a pretty decent summary. What was your initial review of it after you went through the 9 points we always use to review these films?
My review score is 6.55.
Okay.
Which
solid.
Don't know where the 5.5 came from, but that's where.
Yeah, I gotta work on the back end of that a little bit just to really massage some of those corners. Don't know what's going on there. Sean, what was your final rating for Jurassic Park?
Well, conflict always makes for better discussion. I'm an 8.6. All right.
Let's go.
This is one of my top movies of all time. There are some ones that I think are better. Like I think,
Sure.
oh gosh, what's the Miles Teller drum movie? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh,
Whiplash.
um,
Whiplash, I think, is probably one of the
okay.
best movies of all time. But this is way up there.
Nice. Nice. Love it. Yeah, I got a 6.35, which I personally, when I got it, thought that was a little low. But so I could be convinced, to raise that up definitely at least a half a point, if not more. So we'll see what comes out of this discussion today. But let's just start off with the opening scene. You get that opening look with, first off, these people trying to shove a velociraptor into a cage, and then instead it grabs one of those guys and eats him up, or causes chaos at the very least. I guess he doesn't. Well, anyways, like you get that initial scene, and there's some danger, and then the guy's getting sued, and they're like, you need to find some semblance of safety around this park you're opening, Mr. What was it, John Hammond, who was the main.
Yeah, John Hammond.
The main creator of the park, and so that's where he goes off, and he gets Alan and Ellie, who are these two archaeologists slash, she's like a biologist type character as well.
Paleobotanist.
To help.
I was about to say, like, paleo.
So yeah, they're like experts in their field who should have knowledge on the types of creatures that are in the park and provide some authenticity and verify that the park is good to some degree, so lending their expertise in this situation. There was kind of a lot that went on in like the first 2 or 3 scenes, but those were the ones that really encompassed the basic framework for the rest of the film and pushed it going forward, introducing you to the characters, introducing you to the framework of the world and everything that's going on. So, Sean, what was your initial thoughts on how they opened the film and what they did in that made it compelling? Because obviously you thought it was compelling.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to be the guy that goes, well, here's how the book did things differently. So, audience, rest assured, I will not make book comparisons. However, I think the things that stick out is if you like the opening, you're probably going to like the rest of the movie. If you have problems with the opening, you're probably going to have problems with the rest of the movie, because the way that the opening presents itself is it presents brutal, gruesome death of some kind, but it also is a bit cheesy 90s-ish, the way it is shot, with the guy being dragged by an off-screen monster and like gripping around the corner of the cage. Like, if you think that looks goofy, you're probably going to perceive a lot more of the movie that way. So I think it does a really good job too of veiling the reveal of the dinosaurs and what they looked like until later in the movie. By choosing to just keep it off screen, it leaves the audience compelled, presuming they've never seen any of the trailers ever, as to what the dinosaurs will actually look like in motion.
Well, it's kind of a Spielberg thing too, where it's like the threat is hidden out of sight until a key moment where you finally see what it is.
Right. And to build up that tension, it definitely, and you see this a lot. This is one of my big takeaways from watching the film this time, was how well they don't just like show you the threat, but they build up the tension and they show the danger slowly coming closer, right? Especially that scene with the water and the T-Rex. When he first shows himself, you see the water like slowly, with the rumbling of his footsteps affecting the water as it jitters in the cups. Like, there is things like that that help to emphasize the threat that is coming without actually showing it and letting you sit in that tension and wonder what's going to happen, right? That kind of stuff, especially if you haven't seen the film before, is a very good way of building tension and creating a compelling character before you even see them on screen. So they do that from the start with the very introduction of the dinosaurs. I could see how that would be seen as cheesy, but like for a lot of people, I still think that there's use for that type of technique. You just got to be careful how you do it. And I enjoyed it as much as, let me just say, I enjoyed this a lot more in a rewatch than I have in some of the newer Jurassic World films that are much better CGI, much better in a lot of, ways that people critique movies, but in all honesty, in regards to storytelling, maybe not as compelling. So, kudos to Spielberg and the crew on that one. But at that point, you get introduced to the characters of Alan and Ellie, who are these paleontologists, and their work, and them getting roped into the whole group as how Hammond is getting that verified stamp of approval from an expert in the field saying, you're good, this park is great, everyone can come, there should be no concerns at all, right? What was your thoughts, Sean, on introducing these two primary characters to the film?
I think as far as establishing what Grant's arc is going to be, it does a good job. It also provides some very realistic motivations for both of them, like dropping everything they're doing and going to the island. Paleontology is historically one of the least paid academic fields like ever. And the idea of a paleontologist getting like a boatload of money if you just like go for a weekend to this tropical like vacation island in the Atlantic, because it's west of Costa Rica. I think it does a good job like getting us to where we need to be. One thing that I think carries throughout the movie is they don't go into long expositions, and so there's lots of like snappy conveyances of information that are like, hey, this, okay, let's go.
And the thing that struck me about that scene too was that they created, like you said, with the big load of money that they gave him, they created very compelling reasons for people to be involved in this plot, right? Even though you might have that cheesy 90s opener where someone gets dragged off screen, right, as they are getting destroyed by a monster, in that scenario, they also used it as a conduit for the lawyers being concerned based off of their clients that maybe this isn't a safe investment for the investing community that has helped bring this vision to life. So, like, that was a compelling start to have Hammond go on this mission to find these people and bring a positive reputation to his new work, his new park. So, there was a lot of cohesive, reasonable arguments for everyone being in this scenario, right? And why they should be there, which is important to note primarily because in horror movies and some thriller movies, you will see a lack of this a lot, where characters will just do things with no reason or no logic at all behind them. They're just like, oh, clearly I'm going to walk into this haunted house. Why? Why wouldn't I? No, because it's clearly haunted and you're probably going to die, right? There's like very little logic in some of these scenarios. And in this one, thankfully, they don't have that. So once again, a very good mark on their point. Avalon, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I have one other thing, which is just...
go ahead, Sean. Either of you.
Hammond's introduction to meeting Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler, I remember them by their last names, is that when his helicopter lands and it's like blowing away at the dig site, it's already establishing from this beginning the potential conflict between Graham and Sattler versus Hammond, which is that his technology is seeking to blow away the past and render it irrelevant by like presenting his new future. He doesn't really have a particular care for like their dig site. So he comes in, messes up everything, and then whisks them away. And I think that's like an effective way to establish what Hammond is ignoring as he's bulldozing forward into the future.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that leads into the themes hardcore. Avalon, I don't know. I don't want to steal anything that you're going towards, so I wanted to give you a moment to speak if you had any additional thoughts.
The only thing I would add, as far as like, Grant goes, Dr. Grant, introducing his characters, they kind of establish like some of his character flaws right from the get-go too, where it's like he kind of is a character who, even though he's passionate about what he does, he doesn't have a whole lot of patience with a lot of other people, and especially with kids. And it's like you kind of get this idea that he's not brash, but like you just get this idea of a character who's not necessarily thinking of others all the time. Like he does care. He's generally a nicer guy, but you get these aspects of his character. He's clearly like he's human. He's not like they fully flesh out his character within the opening scenes of the movie. So like you get an idea of who he is from the get-go. So,
yeah.
I appreciate that when they can effectively when a story can create a 3D, like we're not given just a cardboard cutout, we're given a fully human character. That's what I appreciate. So that's all I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
And you see that with the kid, right? Where the kid is talking to him at the beginning and he's scaring the kid just because he can. He doesn't like kids. And he makes that very clear to Elliot. Like, no, I don't like kids. Why would you like kids? They're stinky, they're smelly, all that stuff. I mean, my only question at that point was why was the kid at the dig site? But, I'm not going to get too caught up in that because it seemed a little questionable based off of the scenario. But, I mean, whatever. I'm not gonna. Yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna get caught up in that.
Usually at paleology dig sites, they will have a lot of volunteers, and you can take any hands you get as long as they're trained volunteers. So that kid could have been there because their parents were there, or it could have been like a fundraising tour. So there are a lot of plausible, but the movie just provided. So you shouldn't do work for the movie that is provided.
I did notice that, but I didn't make any note of it because I was like, oh, well. I mean, I noted it in my mind when I watched it. I was like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's not like there is many. There could be a dozen explanations for this. So,
right.
And I think a movie doesn't have to explain every little detail that comes across the screen, especially if there's like, you could easily explain it. Like something like that's like, okay, whatever. Like you don't need to give us a reason for that. So
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, it didn't really affect the rating much at all for me. It was just like I was rather confused, and that background for someone who's not into paleontology at all, like I know nothing about digging up fossils. That's helpful, But
did it affect the rating at all though?
I mean, so I gave on regards to the opener, I gave it out of 4 out of 5, right? So it was almost perfect, but not perfect, right? So it was like, and I don't know that that's specific to that, right? I would just say that it was like, oh, it was a great opener. Was it the amazing opener that I loved? Like, no, but like I still really enjoyed it. So it got almost full points from me. So, I mean, I think if you want,
meant so much to you.
That's funny. I mean, no, it didn't mean anything to me. That was the point. But no, I mean, I think he was the kid was useful for the purpose of explaining the values of our main character, and for that reason, it's good to have him in there. I don't want to get too caught up in that because they get whisked away to the dinosaur world in Jurassic Park that John Hammond creates, and he brings along the lawyer who I can't remember the name of, Ian Malcolm, I believe.
Oh, Ian Malcolm's the mathematician. Donald's the lawyer.
Right. And then obviously the 2 paleontologists and the 2 kids show up at some point, but I think they're already at the park. So what was your thoughts about them introducing us to this world and the vast sweeping landscapes with the dinosaurs walking and all of that stuff? Sean, what was your thoughts on that?
I loved it. I thought, like, how far into the movie are we talking here? I don't want to cut too far, but like the introduction of explaining why they have dinosaurs, I thought was reasonably scientific to get the point across. I thought the reveal of the dinosaurs with the sweeping music and like everybody like shockingly turning their heads was great. So I found it really, really compelling.
I think for the most part, the world the movie presents is very well made and well, like it gives this like creates this world of awe and wonder where you see these giant creatures that are supposed to be extinct, but they're somehow alive, and you see humans and dinosaurs more or less side by side. It is a really cool visual, and props to Spielberg for how he shot it and how he like recreated these dinosaurs at the time. The only thing about the world that did briefly pull me out of the movie is that she mentions plants that are supposedly extinct that are in this island, like from their era or something. And it was just a brief moment, and I don't know. I mean, just the back of my head reasoning. I just like that doesn't work the same way as the dinosaurs, though. That doesn't work with the genetics you mentioned. Like, there's a part of me that's just like, wait, hang on. I got a little caught up. I got slightly caught up on that moment.
That's a thing I'm pretty sure they explain in the book, which is a downside of the movie if it pulls you out, which is um, mosquitoes aren't the only thing that gets trapped in amber. You also find seeds and pollen that can get trapped in amber. And so
Okay.
presumably they could do a form of DNA extraction from there. Um, Also, there are like plants that exist today in some regions of the world that were around hundreds of millions of years ago, but that doesn't explain like
Yeah.
extinct plants.
Now I completely forget where we were going with that.
We were talking about the world.
Entering the
Yeah,
world.
yeah. So, yes, entering the world, and they show them the DNA thing, and they show them how the animals are made, and then you have that whole discussion at dinner, where you have the notable discussion by the mathematician about the like the thesis, if you will, of the whole film, where he talks about people push forward. Saying if they could and never question if they should, right? And that was this idea like, are we playing God with nature when we do these things by creating animals that are now extinct, right? And it's an interesting concept that you've seen explored maybe in other genres, whether that's AI today or gene editing and stuff like that we see. But what were your guys' thoughts on that scene and the themes that they introduce in this film? Sean, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I've seen this compared to, and I think it's very apt, Frankenstein narrative about the cautionary tales of pushing too far, too fast with science. I think this movie, what that scene represents, is a critique triangle, where on one end you've got science, on another end you have profit, and then on the third end you have nature. And presenting these three as a triangle where if you go too far in one direction, you let yourself get pulled to the point of disaster. And different people around the table represent different experiences and endpoints, which I think only one person ever finds the solution for. There's a lot of critique in this movie without solutions. And that's pretty exemplified by this
Mm-hmm.
table conversation.
Yeah, I don't know, Avalon, if you have anything to add to that. I mean, it's a pivotal scene in the movie for sure.
Yeah, it was a very well thought out discussion, and I mean it definitely adds more depth to what's happening in the story in the movie, where what they're just questioning the validity of what they're doing, the morality, the ethics. Like, are we playing God, or are we messing with nature? Like, by recreating what has been already killed off and is extinct, are we rising? Are we essentially, are we playing God? I mean, that's the best way to describe it. So it's a good question, and the movie tries kind of like follows through that thread, like what happens when we take this path and when we make these decisions. And in a certain way, it almost comes to the conclusion that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily say yes or no to the whole playing God thing, but it does answer the question like people should matter more than what we can do. Like, if people's lives are on the line,
Right.
then maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Or something along those lines.
Right.
So.
And you have that somewhat combined with Alan Grant's character arc, right? As you see, he doesn't like kids, but at the end of the day, he's trying to save the kids that he's with because he knows it's the right thing to do. And in this scenario, that's what he does. He doesn't like the kids. He doesn't really want to hang out with them, but he's trying to stop evil, or just actually, it's just mindless beasts. Stop them from killing them, and so he knows to do the right thing even in the midst of that scenario, and that gets combined with this idea of like, what is the right thing to do, and maybe the right thing to do is to not create the monsters to begin with, right? So, or is it? I mean, I don't know. Sean, do you have any pushback, any other additional thoughts on that?
Not at the moment. I feel there might be more later as we talked about how the movie develops.
Right, and how it terminates and the messages it's trying to convey. Totally fair. So you see that the characters start their little adventure, visiting the different parts of the park, and you see there's a whole bunch of monsters / dinosaurs that we're introduced to in the middle of this. You get the Triceratops, who's sick. You get the T-Rex in his cage. You get the Velociraptors, and they're a big part of this film and preceding films after this. So it's definitely a big part of that. I don't know if you wanted to touch at any of the dinosaurs specifically, or overall just what you get as the tension rises and they're thrown literally out of the vehicles, and they're running for their lives and all of that stuff. But it slowly develops until they all get cajoled and corralled into the main center of the park where they originated from. And what were your thoughts on that? Do you think that it was good at developing the tension and building up suspense in this film?
Rising tension, I think, is well established as we start to get to where everything spirals out of control. What we are learning as they're going through the park is Hammond's line of sparing no expense is either a white lie he tells himself, which he thinks is true, but isn't his saving grace, or he hasn't actually spared no expense, and there's evidence of that throughout the movie. And like all these little things start to break down as the audience notices. Oh, we put so much care in the park, except the Triceratops is getting sick and we have no idea why. Well, if you've spared no expense, how do you have these problems that you've got unresolved? There's all these glitches in the computer system. Mm-hmm. The doors aren't locked in the car. Is it really as safe as everybody is saying? You just see these little points of friction as we start to get towards the climax, which start to reveal the cracks in the system that Ian Malcolm is alluding to. So I think it does a pretty good job at trying to convey how could it have possibly gotten to this point.
And you even get that to a certain degree in his fight with, is it Nedley, the rogue programmer? Yeah. So Nedry, when they're fighting, and he's talking about, he's always complaining about his financial problems, and alongside of that, they talk about, hey, well, this system was built to be run off of like a skeleton crew, that you could run this with hardly anyone there, and things like that, where it seems like, oh, well, maybe they are cutting corners in developing this park, which is questionable if you're talking about massive dinosaurs that could break out and roam free. And guess what happens? Avalon, you have any additional thoughts on that?
I was gonna say something about foreshadowing, but I'll leave that for later on. I don't really have much more else to say about heightened tension. It's good. I gave it almost full points for heightened tension, I think. So
okay, wow, nice. Did in regards to heightening tension, sometimes it's done well when you have foreshadowing of some degree that you were kind of alluding to right now. It might be appropriate to bring that up because in those revelations you say, oh, something was coming.
Yeah. Well, we're just thinking at the very beginning of the movie when we meet Alan, Dr. Grant, when he's talking to that kid specifically, and part of the reason that scene with the kid is there, he's talking about the velociraptors and how they hunt as packs, and he tells them how they kill. Essentially, they distract you while one attacks you from behind. And literally, later on in the movie, in that tense scene with the one security guy, I forget his name, but he's, watching, he gets his gun out, he's gonna shoot the other velociraptor, and the other velociraptor comes out of the shadows from the side and kills him. So it's almost like, if you're paying attention, it follows through what we already told this was going to happen.
Right.
So,
or even just things like early on, they have that video explaining how they fixed the gaps in the DNA, and they said, oh, they used frog DNA to help replicate it because it was similar enough. And then later on, they go, oh, well, how are the dinosaurs creating eggs if they're all female? That's not possible. Well, turns out that the frogs have this ability to, change their sex and stuff like that. And so they have this malfunction in the system they built that allows for interbreeding that should not have existed in the world they thought they created. So they did foreshadowing very well several times in this film. Would you consider that the revelations that like a big revelation in this film, or a minor revelation that somewhat impacted the film? What were your thoughts on those? And there could be other examples too. I
would say that revelation was a small revelation, only because that revelation in particular doesn't really change much in terms of the story itself. because they're trying to survive and get off the island. And while sure it changes, like, oh, these dinosaurs can survive and reproduce on their own and multiply on the island, it doesn't really change the nature of their goal. Like, they still have to get off the island to survive, and maybe... And it just doesn't make it more pressing, because you don't necessarily know how long it's going to take these baby dinosaurs to get older. Now, if they were hunting the dinosaurs, maybe that would change things a little bit more, but they're not. They're just trying to get out. They're just trying to survive. Right. So, I mean, that's why I say it's a small revelation, and I think maybe it was supposed to have a bigger impact on the plot, but in the context, it didn't feel like a big revelation to me, so...
Yeah, that's fair. Sean, what were your thoughts on things they revealed in this film? It doesn't have to be that one specifically, but bigger. What made this a pivotal scenes in these movies, or was there like a shattering loss that you thought really changed the game for our protagonists in this film?
I think the losses point is actually where I lose points for the film, is that the core cast of characters that honestly the audience actually cares about all live. All the characters that end up dying are those we either despise inherently for some reason, like the lawyer. Oh, Americans hate lawyers. Or or Samuel L. Jackson. He's like a side character who, yes, he's funny. He's sympathetic.
I have a feeling you're gonna bring Samuel L. Jackson up.
But at the end of the day, like, he doesn't get that many lines devoted to him that make us want to care about him. He is a vehicle for, like, he's often giving exposition to explain why we can't turn on certain systems or whatever. But, like, who he is and who his motives aren't that particularly important. Whereas Grant's motives, Sattler's motives, Malcolm, they all matter a lot more. So I think a lot of people that die just aren't massive losses for the audience. They're shocking, they're exciting, but they only serve to establish tension.
I actually wrote down my notes that some of the characters have good motives, but there's a few, like, as you said, Samuel L. Jackson's character, who we aren't given a motive for. We're not given a reason for, like, what he wants or what he's, like, why he's there. Even the security guy, we don't really get a motive for him, too. It's like, these characters are just there, they exist to fulfill a purpose, so they get killed off, we don't feel anything.
I think Muldoon, really.
The only character
Muldoon, Muldoon's the big game hunter. I think we do get a purpose for him, which is that he is someone who is ever fearful of nature, and he says, I think they should all be shot. We should not have created these things. He sees himself personally as the insurance policy to prevent it from getting out of control. But also, he only has like 6 lines of dialogue in the entire movie, so...
Yeah, and it was interesting because this is another one of those films early on, right, where they were, I mean, and having just recently rewatched The Lion King, right, you see how tight the dialogue is in this kids animated film, and you get the same type of thing in this, where a lot of the dialogue is there because it serves a purpose, right? It's not fluff, and it's not over dramatic to the way that you've seen in a lot of recent Disney's Marvel stuff and whatnot, but you get a lot more like this. They're saying this because it either explains something to you as the audience, or drives the plot forward, or adds some sort of emotion to the film. So even in the side characters' dialogue, there is that purpose. And you get that to a degree with the deaths. I think, Sean, what you were pointing out was really interesting, is that, for example, Samuel L. Jackson's character, right? He explains things in the film, and then also he's more of a tool, to be honest, where it's like he is demonstrating to you as the audience there is danger where Ellie's about to go. And so it heightens the tension as Ellie goes over to help restart everything, right? And then when she finds the arm and she's freaking out, right? It adds to the... So they build up the tension really well by using these deaths effectively. The only difficulty with that is you don't get as much of the out of the frying pan into the fire scenario when the solution is, oh my goodness, a dinosaur, run away, and then you run away, and then you're safe again for, 10 minutes or whatnot. So I think that was a fair critique, that like they could have done something that actually materially hurt the primary characters in the film. What that looks like, I don't really know. Maybe someone loses a limb, or someone who is actually important to the film dies. I don't know. But like, if you only kill off unimportant side characters, you don't feel the impact of the film as much as if someone who you've grown to care for and want to see survive ends up having to face real loss.
And that's the reason someone dies in the book that doesn't die in the movie. It's precisely because of your gripes.
Interesting. Now I'm curious.
You'll have
is
to read
it
it.
one of it? Oh, you know what? That's fair. You dirty dog. That's very fair. I am a reader. I'll do that. So the movie ends with this whole scene with the scene in the middle of the exhibit hall, if you will, with all of the fossils and whatnot, and you see the velociraptors going at the whole quad of kids and old paleontologists as they're getting away, and then at the last minute, chunk, and the T-Rex came in and ate the dinosaur. What were you guys' thoughts on the climax to this film?
Amazing. It's iconic, okay? How can you not? The shot of the T-Rex, like, posing for the camera as the banner is falling. Like, literally, the whole place is collapsing, and the T-Rex stands defiant against it. The fact that nature is simultaneously the antagonist that's been threatening all of our human heroes, but it is also the fact that nature fights itself that is what saves them. Like, this burns an image in people's minds. It's got an iconic roar, an iconic look. We can nitpick how did the T-Rex stealth its way into the arena without anybody hearing it, but
Sure.
It's overwhelmed by the fantastic presentation of the whole thing.
I was actually going to say something about that, because I think that I agree the ending is actually pretty epic and pretty... it is one of those scenes that really stands out, just especially like the dinosaur roar with the banner falling down in front of it. Like, it's just a very well done, like the whole, like it coming in and eating the velociraptors. Yes. I do agree. I do kind of wish there was some like hint of it being there beforehand. Like, it didn't even have to be something major, just like, because we were getting the tremors throughout the movie. We could have had like maybe some kind of tremor sound or like something that indicated something. Just like slightly there, like that would have been like enough foreshadowing or just like hint of what was coming. But it was okay. Other than that, you're right. It's nitpicking. So
right, and it would, if you did it too much, it would break the revelation of what's about to happen. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the tremors so much. I do enjoy the ending of the film, and I think especially I've been very tainted having seen, Jurassic Worlds and all that, and guess what? They use the same technique over and over again, so this is not, like, new for someone who's seen the rest of the series, but understanding that, like, this is where it started, this is where you see it first come out, and just the full cohesion, like Sean was talking about, with even the themes of the film coming together in the climax of this film was great. Even having that jaded outlook, I still thoroughly enjoyed it, and definitely thought it was a apt ending to the conflicts that existed in this film. I don't know.
At least it's better than the oldie font.
Yeah. Sean, for reference, they do have a elephant sneak up on someone in the War of the Rohirrim. So that was
an absurd scene.
Yes, a little absurd. But kind of like this. But in this case, this one was too awesome. It overshadowed it. In that case, you were a little like, "What the heck just happened?"
Yeah.
I'll have to watch the review to find out. And you should too, audience.
Nice. All right. So, what are your thoughts on? Obviously, you get that climactic arc. What are your thoughts on that? Right into the sunset. The satisfaction you had from this film, but especially like the themes that they conveyed throughout this film. What was the message that they were conveying to us? Avalon, what were your thoughts?
I mean, I kind of already said part of it. Just like the whole idea of themes and just like how, I mean, it doesn't really, I don't personally think it gives an answer to the whole idea of playing God with genetics. And, I mean, it does kind of look down on like trying to be too controlling of nature. But as a whole, the themes of the movie, like, it emphasizes the people around you over the work that you're doing. So, like, the purpose should be to, I guess, help those around you, I guess, or to, like, keep them in mind, not put them in the line of harm's way. Uh, and I did, and as far as the characters and story, I love the character arc of Dr. Grant, like, from beginning to the end. I like the whole story that takes place between these characters, and I think I was very satisfied with the way it ends. So
Nice. Sean, what were your thoughts?
As far as what is the message and takeaway, I totally agree that for Jurassic Park 1, the takeaway is in the midst of all this danger of money, technology, nature, family, and the people you care about is what matters. So I'm going to agree with him and not repeat any more than that. What I will say is that there are 3 themes that go under this in that triangle that we'll want to keep track of as we see the series as a whole, whether it maintains or develops these messages. There's the theme of profit, where we very explicitly get a anti-profiteering message when scientists should only seek science for the sake of better human understanding and nothing more. So in terms of how it sees profit, it's a rejection of profit, and science should be for its own sake. But if you're going to do science, you should do science in an extremely cautionary manner. That chaos theory posits you can control a system for a brief time, but it eventually spirals beyond your predictable control. And then once it has spiraled beyond, you confront nature. And this movie only tells us that nature is something brutal and something that refuses to be contained. Hammond does all these attempts to try and contain it. We'll throw in frog DNA because we can't make them exist in the first place. We'll put them in cages. We'll tie a goat down. And all of that gets undermined because nature refuses to let itself be confined. Even in our own lives, we see roots cracking apart concrete, ants crawling through the thresholds of our doors. A jaguar will maul you if you decide to wander into the jungle. Nature's this brutal thing you can't control. So I agree with Avalon about what the message is. I think those 3 themes, though, are something you should keep note of as you continue to watch the series.
Yeah, and you see the sense in which, like, this idea that we create it and so we can fully control it is explored a lot in film in many different regards. We reviewed a couple months ago Ex Machina, which is a fantastic movie about the same types of ideas, but underneath the idea of AI. And, like, can you create entities that will then be fully thinking, fully functioning, but are created by man? What does that mean? The implications of that, playing God in that arena. So you get this is a great topic to discuss. It's very interesting, and to explore it in film is just fantastic. And kind of like what Sean was pointing out with the climax, right? You get this idea that, oh, what do you do when you try to harness nature and to control nature, and nature gets out of hand, right? But at the same time, nature will also fight itself and will come to conflict with itself to help create the harmony that we see in the world today. So I thought that it's interesting that it has the nuances in the film, and it's not just a browbeater with an idea like, oh, you need to think these things and believe these things. No, it's fully exploring the ideas, and it does it very well. So definitely enjoyable. Would you this movie's been around for what, 30 years now? Over 30 years.
1993.
It's considered, it's a classic. What are your thoughts on that lasting impact it's had? Will it continue to have that lasting impact? What are your thoughts, Sean?
I think it has a lasting impact based on the fact they've made so many more movies in the franchise. I don't think, however, any movie will ever replace it. It stands alone on its own, and every development tries its best to expand upon the idea, but it can never replace the original thing. And sure, some of the animation might be outdated, but the puppeteering effects are still stellar. Music's still stellar. Camera work's still stellar. Acting is great. It's not wooden. So I think it'll stand the test of time for a really long time, particularly because the message it tells is still relevant, right? You're talking about Ex Machina. Clearly, Frankenstein-esque stories still persist into the modern day.
Yeah, absolutely. Avalon, you have anything
I mean,
to add to that?
I mean, we on this podcast we'll just discuss like whether a movie stands the test of time, and we'll like discuss the idea like some movies are just good movies, and then movies that are like almost like they create a template. Like this is a movie that stands on its own, and like everyone looks to this movie as like the basis of an idea or concept. Like we've mentioned, Gladiator being one of those movies that is definitely like stands apart from everything else, and you can't replace that. You can't surpass that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say Jurassic Park is similar in that regards because like you can emulate it, but you can't really surpass it because it's like this is the standard, the baseline. Like this is the template where everyone is pulling from, and you can't really. Like, it's almost impossible to like create something that's better than this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 100%, and that's very fair. Do you think that it affects a lot beyond just, I guess, because I think of this as like a monster movie, kind of leaning toward the horror-esque, but not really horror. Do you think that it's isolated to its genre, or do you think that it has an impact beyond into other stories as well?
Well, one thing I'll say, and this is not necessarily a thing about Jurassic Park, but this is about Spielberg himself. Because, I mean, we haven't actually reviewed a whole lot of Spielberg movies on this podcast yet.
That's fair, yeah.
And I have to say, there was a point in time where I was like a huge fan of Spielberg and going through a lot of his movies. And one thing he does really well is he does the human relationship thing and like grounding things in the human dynamic. And I think Jurassic Park, one of the things it does really well, it gets you more rooting for the characters, is the human relationships, the human element. Because it's like, you have these like scenes where the Dr. Grant is like with the kids in the midst of the wild, and like he's showing them these dinosaurs up close, and like in a certain sense, this scene doesn't really add much to the overall story and the conflict, but it adds something to the human element of the characters. It develops them more, and it establishes the kids and the Dr. Grant more as humans, and like showing the wonder of the world they're in. It takes the time to like showcase like who these people are, and like showing off this cool dinosaurs. It's just like adding to that wonder.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that's something I think that other movies could learn from, other studios, where it's like, if you just bring more of that human element into it and develop these characters more, you could have a much more deeper story, a deeper meaning to what's going on.
If we're also going to talk about lasting impact, this is a film podcast, but this film has a lot of effects on scientific fields. Like, for one, it has a lasting impact on inspiring lots and lots of people to get interested in both the genetic and paleontological fields. You could go into any paleontology major, ask who's seen Jurassic Park, and almost 99% of them have all raised their hands, because this is what people are raised on, and inspires them to go do research for research's sake, as the movie asks people to do. This movie also, a lot of the concepts they introduce in terms of technology and genetics or even our understanding of dinosaurs, were really, really new at the time that the book was being written, starting 1981 until 1991, and then through the development of the screenplay. And so at the time, this film represents like, this is what we know about dinosaurs as recent research as possible. Bird-like hollow bones, the way that they may or may not have behaved, what they ate, the kinds of technology, are being able to desequence an entire genome. This movie's represents like it's a period piece on what scientific knowledge of dinosaurs was at the time, that also has a lasting impact, where here's what we got wrong 30 years ago, here's what we got right 30 years ago, but this is what we knew at the time.
And that's interesting too, even that broader context. I mean, like I said, I don't really know anything about digging up fossils, so I purely enjoy this from like a cinematic viewpoint, but I do think that there is an aspect in which these like films in general, they are the stories that inspire us, right, to do things. And so it is cool to see, well, you're a paleontologist and you watched, partially because you watched Jurassic Park, and it was inspiring to see how they went on this grand adventure and were able to discover things at the same time, and the joy of discovery and in the midst of science and all that kind of stuff. Like, there is a reason that these last, and it's because it actually has an impact on society, even in a small way. Even if it affects a small group of people to pursue a line of work. So That's awesome. Well, I mean, we've gone through the whole film. Is there any other characters you want to mention? You want to leave an honorable note about or discuss before we talk about any revisions to our rating?
Well, I would. The only thing I would say, because we didn't really talk about him too much, is, I mean, he wasn't a major villain. I mean, because this movie doesn't really have necessarily a. If there's a major villain, I guess you could say it's the dinosaurs.
Right.
But I think Nedry does deserve like some mention, only for the fact that he's not acting like he does have a motive. Like his character is not like acting out of a vacuum, like, oh, I'm just going to do this because I can. It's like, I'm trying to earn money, whereas like I have financial issues, and this like thing he's doing illegally on the side, like he's going to sneak this embryos off site, is going to get him a lot of money, and so he has a reason for that. And plus, he just has resentment against Hammond, and that's clearly shown. So from a certain perspective, I just felt like it deserves notice, just deserves to be mentioned. He's not a great villain, I mean, obviously, and he dies partway through the movie, so right. It doesn't, I mean, not that he's like a villain worth mentioning on like, for good villain examples, but I just felt like he deserves points where points or credit, deserves credit where credit is due.
Yeah, and he had compelling reasons for being involved, and I thought that in regards to, I don't exactly recall how the other Jurassic Parks or the Jurassic Worlds went, but I don't recall the villains having as clear or as concise of or reasonable motives. I didn't recall their motives being as reasonable as this one's were, at least portrayed in this film. But Sean, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I do not think there's anything I can add. That I would rather the audience just go watch the movie and see it for themselves.
Nice. So, but would you change your rating after this discussion? I mean, you gave it a 8.6. That is a very high praise, and clearly you liked it. Would you change it at all? Would you change it higher?
I would actually probably lower it a smidgen. I think if this is a lost plot podcast and we're purely focusing on the plot, the fact that there is not a massive revelation that has an impact on the progression of the story deserves that half a point bump that is currently in the total. So I'd probably go down to like an 8 if that is a criteria used to measure the plot. I really appreciate overall the lack of a villainess mustache trolling antagonist as much as Avalon. There's so much to love about this movie, but that's the only way I would probably lower it.
Okay, nice. Avalon, any changes?
I probably would rate. I mean, I was just looking over my points, and I'd say I'd probably give it some points to certain areas. I mean, I'd at least raise it to 6.75 at least, maybe 7 points total.
No, that's fair. I mean, and I will raise it 0.6 because of the discussion. I think you guys made some good points about motives and things. And I'll add an extra 0.1 just because Avalon needled me about the opener. So that'll raise it up to a 7.1 for me total. Honorable film. I'd watch it if someone put it on. I enjoy it. It's a great film. I think it's great. I like it. Yeah. So I have no qualms with it. Yeah. The kid can stay if you guys want to defend him so much. Whatever. That's fine. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's what we got.
I'll also say, it's, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's been a bit since I've seen the first movie, and I know I've seen Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom since then. And I think those movies have soured my perception of the whole franchise as a whole. It just was like, oh crap, not this. And I was kind of like, this is a classic. I guess I should watch it. But I kind of had low expectations going into this. Like, oh wait.
Exactly. There's a reason that this started it all, and it's because there's a lot that is going for it. That's great. So that is the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. We will be back as we always are next week. See you all then.